We have a very special guest here joining us today. We're so grateful for his time, one of the best in the business. He is Omar Kelly of the Sun Sentinel, covering the Dolphins for many, many years. Omar, welcome into the show. We appreciate you taking some time here.
Thank you. No problem. I'm a fan of you guys' work.
We appreciate that, and we've been following you forever. I'll start it off because COVID has dominated the headlines. I do want to talk some Dolphins football, but someone who has been on the beat for so many years, how challenging has it been for you, especially a week like today? Roster cuts coming on Saturday. Obviously, being around the team, the more you can find out, the more you can pick people's brains, the more you can learn. What's been the transition and the challenges in the COVID world?
I think from an environmental standpoint, I think I feel safer in the Dolphins facility or around it than I do anywhere else in the public, because I know everybody is being tested. I know generally everybody in that environment is safe, and they do have 6 feet in terms of distance. I'm a tier 3. And I can't even go in the tier 2 area where my colleague is. I swear we have to go on lunch dates to actually see one another. So that's been good in terms of creating a healthy environment, which makes me a little bit more comfortable that I believe football will go on. But in terms of access information, it's been horrible, a disaster, to the point where we're actually approaching the NFL about, the fact that the organization is limiting us in terms of who we can talk to. And I understand there's a Zoom environment, but we should be able to put in requests to get players that we haven't talked to at all this offseason, like Xavier Howard, or players that have been traded like Anthony Shaheen, who's been here for a month, and we have not had any access to. Like yesterday, they gave us the kicker. And I'm like, okay, but there's no ability to make adjustments. The day that Ryan Fitzpatrick was out, they gave us players that didn't matter when we really needed to talk to Rosen and Tua about their day of practice. So, I understand this is circumstances that nobody can control, but I think we can all do a better job, in terms of navigating this environment.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Omar, got the teal shirt rocking for you.
When we went to video, I figured I had to improve the wardrobe and take off my what they call a wife beater, my tank top, or cover it up.
It depends. You'd call it pop or cola. It depends on where you're at, what you call those shirts.
It's a guinea tea here in Jersey. So,
what is it in Jersey?
A guinea tea.
God.
A guinea tea. I've never heard that.
Yeah, you can only say that if you're by the Jersey, literally living on the Jersey Shore.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, I mean, we never thought we'd be talking about, COVID related and being socially distanced, although being socially distanced from Barry Jackson probably isn't the worst thing in the world for you, at times.
I miss Barry.
He'll love that. Here's something more, way more important. And we've had, some really good conversations about this in past times. And unfortunately now they've come back, and right in our face. As an African-American covering the NFL, how or what do you think will happen? We heard Russell Wilson and his opinion of what would have happened. We've heard some other guys say if we had had a game last week, it would have been really tough to play. What happens if a certain number of guys on a Friday or Saturday say we're not playing? How do you think an NFL or the NFL in general, from your time covering it, what do you think the reaction to that will be, and how do you think it'll go down?
I don't think there's any chance, any possible way you would see an NFL cancel a week of games because of some social justice issue. It's just not the climate that is accepted. Even the players, the mentality of the players is employer when they should be viewing themselves as partners. I just don't. There's not strong enough leadership in the NFLPA or amongst the players, rank and file. The last thing that the NFLPA wants to do is void this wonderful now 10-year agreement that they've created with the NFL, which protects them from, the downturn in the economy. So I understand that the NBA and some Major League Baseball teams said, hey, we're not playing, but I just could not see it in the climate of the NFL, because most of these guys, people don't realize this, but most of these players in the NFL are thousandaires. They're not millionaires. You might be talking about 16 guys on every NFL roster in training camp who are millionaires, and everybody else is a thousandaire. So just the economics of it, I don't think it leads to sort of strong empowerment of the African Americans, who can step away from the game and say, hey, we're not playing this week in terms of to create a statement.
Omar, really quick, you're with the team that I kicked off with in 2002. I was with the Dolphins. That was my first organization. So, little nostalgic for me this morning, thinking about Davey and all that stuff down there with Harvey Green leading the media and everything back in the day. So, but for me, I've taken a very hard stance through all my podcasts and everything on the social justice issue. And I think equality is something that we really need to strive for. How likely, if we don't see a nation or a system-wide shutdown on suspending games, would players literally not play on, can we see big name players saying we're not playing this Sunday because we don't want to show up to work? And again, those are the millionaires. If you get the quarterbacks together and the quarterbacks decide not to play, that will be a huge impact on every game that week. Is there a possible position where certain players or position groups would take that league wide to bring the social justice to the forefront?
I think it's funny that you said that, but I think it would have to be the quarterbacks. I think the show goes on with everybody else. But if the quarterback stepped up and said for all 32 teams, hey, we're not playing this week, I have a hard time believing that they would put a product on the field. So to me, funny you say that, but I think it would have to be the quarterbacks who, and, I don't know if they're at that point. Maybe I don't even think that's even a consideration at this point. But it's something drastic would have to happen between now and the season opener for the NFL to really step up. I think they're probably making plans in terms of what they're going to do from a league-wide standpoint. The Dolphins have had a kneeling player every year since 2016, when Colin Kaepernick has basically decided to kneel to create awareness about social justice issues and police brutality. And I'm pretty confident that they'll continue to have kneeling players, but I don't know if there's going to be anything in terms of cancellation of games. Maybe they'll use the first game to create some kind of awareness and statement. And I think the NFL is behind that, or will be behind that. We'll see.
Well, I know Troy Vincent came out yesterday and I talked about how players have the right to sit. They don't, then no repercussions or anything will happen to them. And with some predominant teams now having black quarterbacks, I mean, even if it's not 32 quarterbacks, but it's the black quarterbacks one week saying, hey, we're not going to play. I mean, that means Kansas City, Baltimore, and, Seattle and Houston are all going to be without their starting quarterbacks. And again, on that note, have you been following what the Ravens are doing as an organization and leading the way, in my opinion, on making sure that they're putting their power behind political they should be using their power to push political agendas with as an organization. How do you feel about the Ravens organization?
I actually haven't paid attention. I don't know what the Raiders organization have been doing, to be honest with you. I've been so focused on training camp. And honestly, as heavy as everything has been with what's going on in the country, and with COVID on top of it, I personally have to distance myself from it. It's too heavy. It's too much of a toll on my emotional state, my mental state. So I'm sort of distancing myself from it. In fact, I haven't written any of the stories related to it just because I don't want to touch it. I don't want to bring that into my space because honestly, I'm just struggling to hold it all together as it is right now, as an African-American male with a wife who works in the healthcare industry at a hospital treating COVID patients every day. You know, I'm just struggling to hold it all together. And I think, to me, I can't even imagine what a player has to go through, which is why when the NBA decides to take a step back and say, hey, we're not playing till Saturday, giving these players an opportunity to kind of unload this stuff. I think that's a healthy thing, because we have to be in a healthy space in order to be at our best at whatever our job is. And me personally, I know right now I'm not at a healthy state. So I know what I can and I cannot handle. And to be honest with you, I probably haven't watched the news for maybe a week and a half. I just can't handle it.
Well, that makes you smarter than the rest of us, Omar.
Yeah,
Well, hey, we appreciate you here. We want to talk some football with you, which is why we had you on. Omar Kelly, Sun Sentinel, best beat reporter on the Dolphins for many, many years. Omar, I'm going to take it. You know, this is such a young team. They had so many draft picks. Preston Williams, though, is a guy coming out last year that we had a top 100 grade on. Obviously,
top
some
100
problems
grade in the draft.
Yeah.
Why did somebody needs to explain to me why he didn't get drafted? Because he's very good. I would put him without a doubt top 5 receiver on the team. I would debate with you whether or not he's better than Devontae Parker. If he can stay healthy for 16 games, no doubt in my mind he'll be a 1,000-yard receiver. The numbers are going to be gaudy. I don't understand how he didn't get drafted, because we know people in the NFL, they'll draft a murderer. They'll draft somebody who has committed murder. And somehow this talented young man, I know he only had one productive season at Colorado State, but like, he can do it all. And I'm quite surprised. I kind of was playing it down last year in terms of what I was seeing. And I was like, okay, you know, beginner's luck. He does push off a lot. And you know, it's very subtle though. So I'm like, they're not gonna call this. They're not gonna let him do this in the NFL in a game, and they let him push off. And I was kind of surprised. He's out there running wrong routes and still being productive, and it seems like he's taking his game up to another level after the ACL injury. And I'm quite impressed. I got to be honest.
Oh, I can answer that.
Either he's really good, or Byron Jones is one hell of a catfish.
Well, you know, he was in my area when I was scouting for the Panthers, so I could tell you the young man's a little eccentric, and he had some off-the-field stuff. Plus, he had some injuries that attested to why, you know, his draft stock fell down, because they couldn't bank on him being a guy who wasn't going to be injury-prone his whole career. And the off-field stuff, even though he met the challenge and did everything to correct it.
Domestic violence, yes.
Right. But as soon as, to his credit, as soon as he got all the rules and what he had to do, he followed the rules to get back on. He practiced with the team, everything to make his teammates better. And he showed up, and he was great that way off the field. But, you know, it's just like, what are you getting as far as character? What are you getting as far as injuries? And then he's eccentric on top of it, where, you know, will your coaching staff be able to
eccentric, define eccentric.
This is a man that would show up at like his coach or call his coach at 2 a.m. saying he's just at the Waffle House thinking about, you know, life, and in a way in which the coach answers the phone thinking like, why aren't you at home sleeping? You know, why are you at the Waffle House thinking about life at 2 a.m. and calling your coach to do that? So, you know, and then, you know, he was a theater major. So when we did his testing in Colorado, it was a hot day. He showed up in a tank top, but he had a scarf around his neck and a pair of shorts and then a pair of tennis shoes on that were like all different, and just kind of like, what's this get up? Like, I don't know what I'm getting right now. It was,
I mean, I do sense there's a little bit of uniqueness to him.
Yeah.
But I've been in NFL locker room for over a decade now, and nobody cares about the unique. You know, if you produce, like, you could show up like Cam Newton, and nobody would care.
Right. And again,
produce.
But again, when you're drafting a guy, you don't know how your coaching staff's going to relate to him. You don't know if they're going to teach him, how he's going to learn for them. So then you're like, okay, on top of the other stuff we talked about, that makes it hard. Now, I was super shocked that he wasn't drafted. I mean, because you found gems like Marquise Colson in the 6th round or whatever. It's like this guy could have easily been a 5th, 6th round pick, even with everything else. Because at that point, he has the production, he has the size. He went to Tennessee. I mean, there was some positive drug tests too. So, like I said, there's a lot of some baggage that came with him.
So you're saying he had too many. He had to pay the $50 check-on fee because he had a 3rd bag of luggage in the NFL.
Exactly. Yeah, he flew Southwest and he got the 3rd bag fee. So if he was flying American, it would have been like $200. Just saying.
Well, John,
he's a talented young man.
Very.
I have watched him dominate practice coming off an ACL injury, and I'm like, And to be honest with you, he has made me question how good Byron Jones is.
Yeah, well,
he's
and
really good, or Byron Jones is Byron Maxwell.
And I remember the Draft Bible debate when he came out. I know we were going to put a 1st round grade on him, and my staff had to reel me in and say, hey, this guy probably isn't going to get drafted. Let's just put a round 3 grade on him and call it a day. And I think this guy is one of the, if you play fantasy football and Preston Williams isn't on your radar, well, hey, there's a guy I think is going to produce. Omar, I know we're going overtime with you. John has one final question for you. We appreciate the time. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so the one thing one of the things that makes you a different kind of guy in terms of covering the team is that you're not just covering what you're told or what, kind of what's the everyday stuff that everybody else sees. You've always had a really good way of seeing the game or seeing what's happening with them before the fans or the rest of the people around. So now it's a lot more difficult without seeing every practice, and there's no preseason games. What is there a guy, like I think Chris Greer, we were mentioning them, between free agency and the draft, and then how they handled themselves at the draft and looking like they hit on a lot of guys, that were guys that they probably were surprised at times, were there, at different points of the draft. Is there somebody on that O-line? Is there somebody defensively? Is there somebody that kind of has stood out, to you that you're saying like, hey, it's a lot of Tua, obviously there's a lot of talk about skill guys and the brand new guys that they paid for in the secondary. But, is there somebody, O-line or linebacker or pass rusher that, you will not be surprised that is a breakout performer this year for the Dolphins?
No question about it. I think Solomon Kinley, let's just go down my list. Solomon Kinley is going to be a decent starting offensive guard right away out the gate. I keep watching him at practice, wondering when he's going to wilt to this heat and humidity, and he doesn't. And so I would expect him to be a day 1 starter and probably one of the more impressive rookie offensive linemen in the NFL. Austin Jackson is there's a little bit of struggle there. You can tell he's not really ready for the bright lights. Malcolm Perry, the Navy quarterback that they've turned into a receiver and a gadget player, you can see the talent, the ability to make people miss is there. It's just how long is it going to take him to learn how to run routes and learn how to be a slot player. And Landon Roberts is a guy who you saw them make that Raekwon McMillan trade. It's because Roberts made McMillan expendable. This was a guy, if McMillan didn't play on special teams, I'm not sure he would be active on a weekly basis. So they really had to move him. And I think the emergence of Roberts, I see him actually being paired with Jerome Baker as the 2 every down linebackers. And then you've got Kyle Van Noy kind of being an edge player for the Dolphins this season. I don't see him being an inside linebacker. So that's going to be atop my list in terms of things that I watch. And another name for you, I think Brandon Jones, the safety from Texas. I think he's got a chance to emerge there as a starting strong safety. Intelligent guy, got a decent amount of ability. I'm not necessarily certain they're comfortable with what Eric Rowe is showing them as a strong safety. More as a rover, he's excelling. As a tight end coverage specialist, he's excelling. But strong safety, run fits, I don't see that.
Yeah, Brandon Jones, a guy, again, before the injuries, very high on a lot of draft boards. I had a chance to see Austin Jackson at USC last year. I didn't really feel like he was a first round talent, but it just the body, the clay, right? You can mold it
Yeah,
and develop it
he
and
was a
grow
first
it.
round talent.
Yeah.
Top 50 talent, yes. First rounder, a little bit of a stretch. And I think you're going to see him go through some struggles. If he was your right tackle, I would say he's fine. He's adequate. Your left tackle, we could be looking at some issues here.
Yeah, I felt the same way. And Malcolm Perry, I like that you brought him up because I do think that's a guy, again, so raw. But when you talk about being able to make plays with the ball in your hand, by the time we start getting to week 12, week 14, week 17, this is going to be a contributor to the team, I feel. So great insight. Omar, I know you're one of the best Twitter follows at Omar Kelly. Any parting shots for the people here before we wrap things up?
Just, it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of the world moving forward, whether we go vaccine, whether we just have to go social immunity. Wear your mask, protect yourself, isolate yourself. If you don't go around your grandparents or your elderly parents too often if you're out in the world. And let's just be smart and care about one another and vote. Definitely vote.
Great messages there. We definitely appreciate the time again. And our thoughts go out to you and your family with your wife working on the front lines. We thank her so much. And we thank you so much for the great work that you do and the hard work, time, effort that you put into covering the Dolphins and being one of the best minds in the NFL. Make sure you go follow him at Omar Kelly. This is The State of Football, Part 23. We'll be back at it again tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. I want to thank all of our guests today, Barry Robert Ozer, David Turner, John Murphy. For Rick Saratella, we'll see you tomorrow, everybody.